Our next speaker is Aba Amissah Quainoo from Ghana, and I will hand over to Dilruba Ahmed from Bangladesh to introduce her. Over to you. Thank you.
Hello, a very good evening to all of you. I wonder what it is your time, but it's 6 o'clock my time. It's really a pleasure and delight to introduce the gathering, our speaker this evening, Miss Aba Amissah Quainoo, Zonta Cup of Accra 2, District 18, Ghana. Miss Aba Amissah Quainoo is a member of Zonta Club of Accra 2, District 18, and was president of the club from 2019 to 2021. She is a development economist and the founder of MEL Consulting Limited. As a management consultant, Ms. Quainoo has worked extensively in Africa and Asia in areas such as development policy and programs, gender equality and social inclusion, private sector development, agribusiness value chains development, development finance, and market access for a variety of clients, including national governments, the World Bank, the US Agency for International Development, USAID, the African Development Bank, ADB, the European Union, EU, the International Fund for Agriculture Development, IFAD, among others. As the co-founder of the Agribusiness Value Chain Federation, Ghana, she is a hands-on investor and works extensively in the rice, maize, soybean, cashew, and selected vegetables and spices value chains with a focus on supporting smallholder farmers, especially the youth and women, with access to finance, production, processing, and market access, including international commodity trade. Friends, I present before you Aba Amissah, and I had great pleasure in knowing what Aba has been doing in her career. So I wish her good luck, and may we derive beneficial knowledge from her delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melita, for that introduction. And it's just past 12, almost 12:30 here. So good afternoon, ladies. A very civil time for me. So I do understand 6 a.m. your end, and for the Australians, they should be fast asleep. But it's nice to be part of this program. And looking forward, Julie, I think you can share for me. Thank you. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, my presentation is looking at Ghana's response to climate change. And incidentally, I was the lead researcher just from September to November last year on Ghana's response to climate change. We were putting together a paper as part of an international group for the climate change forum that was held last year. So this is very much something I'm into, and I'm so interested, and I hope I'll be able to share some ideas with you. Just as a brief background, Accra, which is the capital city of Ghana, is actually below sea level. Accra is below sea level, and yes, you can see from these pictures that the impacts of climate change, flooding, is literally swallowing up our coastline and our cities. And indeed, government is focusing a lot on programs and interventions to protect habitats and reclaim our coastlines the best extent that they can. So flooding, I was just telling Carol and the rest of the ladies at the beginning, the rainy season is starting, and you can imagine we're just getting scared because the flooding has already begun. We can go to the next slide, please. You have a lot of informal settlements along the coastline. Because that part of Accra is very flood prone, nobody is selling the land. So what you find is migrants coming in who don't have anywhere to stay, end up staying in these flood prone locations. And Informal housing and markets just spring up overnight. You just see them springing up. And what you're seeing on your screen is a very typical example of what you see along the coastline of Accra. We go to the next slide. So Odona on the left of our screen, the Odona River is a major river that comes from the mountains of Abri right through most of Accra to the lagoon, Korle Lagoon, and into the Atlantic Ocean. And Old Fadama on the right is a settlement right at the estuary where the Odona River goes into flows into the Atlantic Ocean. And what you're seeing is very typical of what we're going to see of most of Old Fadama from April, May, June. June is the worst part of it. A lot of flooding, a lot of displacement of homes, and the markets that are along that's a part of the lagoon. And as you know, for West Africa, the markets are owned and controlled by women. They are the faces you see in the markets. So this affects a lot of livelihoods and a lot of families. We go to the next slide, please. So all the interventions are aimed at addressing the issues affecting the informal communities, the markets, the businesses, and how to improve resilience. I think if we don't do a lot now, we will probably lose a lot of these communities in the very near future. And the population numbers are huge. During my research, Old Fadama, I was told, probably has about 100,000 inhabitants minimum. It's a very dense community. This is a very dense community. So the focus is improving resilience so that we can protect these communities and their livelihoods. The next slide, please. Now, the interventions that have been pursued in Ghana by both the government and international agencies and some private sector social responsibility funds is looking at how to address the informal businesses and then protect the communities. Next slide, please. The UN Habitat Slum Upgrade project at Gamashi. Gamashi is a very old town, old Accra. That is what we call Gamashi. You have a lot of, it's very rich in terms of the colonial past of Ghana. Gamashi has British Accra, Dutch Accra, Danish Accra. You've got all of them there. And it's a very interesting community, mostly fishing, but the slum is growing. The slum is really, really growing. Refuse collection is a huge challenge, and therefore you find that the estuary gets blocked, and that this also causes more flooding. So the interventions are looking at door-to-door refuse collection so that it can improve the drainage or the spillage of water from gutters, from the small rivers into the Atlantic Ocean, and also to provide some seed capital for mutual funds to support income generation activities, and also support the upgrading of the community as a whole and housing. Incidentally, it's all integrated into a huge project, which is looking at the coastline of Accra, from Gamashi all the way to the castle, which was a former seat of government built by the Danes. You're talking of about a stretch of maybe 25 to 30 kilometers. They are looking at a whole upgrade of that whole stretch, partly to reclaim and to protect the coastline of Accra. We can go to the next slide, please. The Greater Accra Resilient Project is another intervention, and it's focusing on dredging the Odo River. As I said, this is a major river running from the hills of Abri down through Accra, right to the Atlantic Ocean, suffers a lot from dumping of refuse. And so as it rains for about 1 or 2 hours and a huge chunk of Accra is flooded. So dredging of this river is a major project, and it's looking at other slum dwellings on it. During my research, I did spend quite a bit of time along this riverbank, and they're doing quite a bit. I saw a lot of dredging going on. I saw a lot of like docks being built to protect the flow of water and then to protect the communities along the riverbank. You have quite a few markets along the riverbank. And again, if flooding takes place, it affects a lot of women-owned business. We go to the next slide. Now, because flooding affects huge markets in Accra, and if these markets are affected, homes and livelihoods for women-owned businesses are affected, one of the key strategies is to decongest and relocate bulk activities which attract people into these informal markets. If anybody's been to West Africa, you can just picture this bustling scene. You know, the trucks, the women, the carts. It is huge. And when on market days, the kind of congestion in these areas is just phenomenal. And these are the distribution hubs for foodstuffs to feed most of the country and the urban populations. Foodstuff with stables from throughout West Africa, from Ghana, all of them come to these locations. And Old Faudama, the picture which I showed you earlier, is a huge hub for foodstuff distribution throughout Ghana and throughout Accra. So what government is trying to do is to relocate some of these bulk activities to less congested parts of the metropolis. And you can imagine when that decongestion takes place, you are literally evicting people from these communities. There's always a huge outcry. But when I was doing my research, I realized that quite a chunk of Old Faudama has been decongested and reclaimed. So yes, some success being chalked, but in the process, displacing a lot of people and not really giving them a solution to where you're going to put them. The next slide, please. So what can Zonta clubs in Ghana do? And we can go to the next slide. Zonta clubs in Ghana, as a first response, we work with NADMO, which is a disaster management organization. So we are able to provide immediate food, clothing, medication that is needed, because as soon as people are displaced, they've lost everything. What are they going to eat? So these are some of the things we try and do. And I think that we need to start preparing for that, because definitely we're going to see some of this happening in the next few months. So it's something we've been doing. We need to plan for it and start putting resources together so that we can put our widow's mite into the pot to support women and young girls that are displaced when the flooding occurs. The next slide, please. Before I go to this slide, there was very interesting development recently. Government was trying to put up a multi-story dormitory that was to house Kayaye. Now, Kayaye is, these are headquarters, like this young lady you see in the picture. They have this pan that they use. If you're shopping and you need somebody to help you, they will follow you throughout the market. You'll be dropping your shopping into their into the pan. She will accompany you where you're going, and then you pay her a fee. Now, a lot of these young women are migrants from the northern part of Ghana. They come and then they just sleep in front of the shops and anywhere and everywhere in these markets. It's a very, very heart-wrenching sight. So in an attempt to try and solve their housing problem, government was putting up a multi-story dormitory block for them at Old Faudama. Well, when the soil cutting took place, then the problem began. The community leaders of Old Faudama organized a protest and immediately put a stop to the construction of the building. What was their reason? If you put up this building, it's going to serve as a magnet and draw more of these girls here to work as Kayaye. This dormitory block is not going to solve the problem. You need to go, the leaders of the community said to government, you need to go to those communities where many of these young girls are coming from get them some education, give them some income generating activities so that their communities will prosper, they will stay there and not come to Accra and become displaced Kayaye. So as I speak, that project is now on hold, and it's a very, very controversial and touchy issue. So I'm thinking that now, and I've had a discussion with a few of my Zonta colleagues, we think that we should look at how to undertake interventions or collaborate with NGOs that are undertaking interventions in the northern communities where these young girls come from. And as was mentioned in my profile, I work a lot in the northern parts of Ghana, in agribusiness, in the rural communities. So my focus this year will be to at least identify 2 communities where a lot of young girls are drawn from, who come to Accra as Kayaye, and see what I can do with for these young girls with the women's groups who are working there. Is it food processing? Is it farming? Whatever. We will look at that, and I will probably share some information later on in the year, so you know what I've been able to do in the north when it comes to agriculture in those communities where a lot of these young women come to Accra as Kayaye. So we can go to the next slide. Again, Zonta clubs in Ghana, especially my club, we currently have a scholarship scheme for 12 young girls. We've been supporting these young girls for about 7 years now, through primary school, through junior secondary, and now senior secondary school. We're very, very happy with the girls. They've all been able to stay throughout. And one actually fell out because she got pregnant, but she's back in school, and we've enrolled her back onto our scholarship. So we're looking at how we can probably set up scholarship schemes in those communities in the north and other parts of the country where a lot of these young girls are drawn into Accra, Old Fadama to work as Kayaye, so that we can keep them in school in collaboration with the school heads and the PTAs of the schools. We will see how best we can support them to keep them in school. Even if we're only able to work with 10, that's a huge number, because you find that these girls come to Accra, look out for them in a year's time, and they will all have babies, which they can't feed and nourish. That's 20 people who will be displaced in Accra. So we'll see what we can do about scholarship schemes for those kind of communities up north. The next slide, please. Advocacy, and Zonta clubs in Accra do quite a bit of that. We need to look at the issues that affect women disproportionately as far as climate change is concerned. And in my research, the first thing was housing and the loss of their businesses. So what can we do to protect them? What are the agencies that are involved? How can we influence policy so that more resources are diverted into helping these women? We have rural and low-cost housing schemes springing up all over. But once these buildings have been built, they're too expensive. The women cannot afford them. So what can we do to influence the policies or the funding for such projects so that they can look at really low costs and not middle income, and then it's all snapped up by a few people who end up renting them at exorbitant prices. So advocacy is something we do. We will continue to do a bit more of it, but we'll look at focusing on the areas that are affecting climate change in Ghana. The next slide, please. Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you.